And it's been a rough week in court for the Trump family. Don Jr. and Eric Trump both testified in the civil fraud case with the future of their family business at stake. Today was Eric Trump's second day on the stand, and NBC reporters note that Eric Trump seemed more nervous today than in yesterday's testimony. They report that he was often leaning back and forth in his chair and fidgeting, and they also described him as agitated and defiant. The civil prosecutor spent part of today asking Eric Trump about Alan Weisselberg's severance package. Weisselberg, you'll recall, served 3 months at Rikers Island for tax fraud and was removed from his position as CFO of the Trump Organization. When he left, he was given a $2 million severance package with some strings attached, including a provision specifying that Weisselberg could not communicate with, provide information to, or otherwise cooperate in any way with any other person or entity. And Weisselberg has been true to his word. He has never cooperated with Manhattan prosecutors in Donald Trump's Stormy Daniels hush money case, one of the 4 criminal trials that Trump is currently facing. And Eric Trump says that he was responsible for the Weisselberg severance deal. I was the person who did this. I signed it, I negotiated it, and asked if his father had any involvement in this. He said no, he did not. After testifying, Eric Trump spoke to reporters, blasting the whole trial as a political witch hunt.
She's come after my father ruthlessly. Every single day a Trump is in this court. Guess what? She shows up. Why? Because it's her press moment. We haven't done a damn thing wrong, and they dragged Don and I into it as collateral damage. You know why? Because if you can line up as many Trumps as you possibly can, she can sit in court for an extra couple days, and then she can send fundraising emails every single day to her donor base saying, I'm going after Trump.
Experts say that this was a rough week in court for the Trump sons. The Attorney General's lawyers were able to prove with evidence that the sons were actively engaged in compiling the company's financial statements, many of which, the judge has already ruled, were fraudulent. And there's more bad news for Team Trump. Today, the judge issued a ruling expanding the gag order in the case to include not just Donald Trump, but also his lawyers. Judge Engoron was apparently furious that Trump's lawyers appeared to accuse a court staffer of bias. Joining me now to discuss all of this is Maya Wiley, former civil prosecutor with the Southern District of New York, and Renato Mariotti, a former federal prosecutor. Maya, what is your reaction to this bombshell week in court? How bad was this for the Trump brothers?
Well, there's a reason that Eric Trump was much more nervous today than earlier in the week, and it is because it has not gone well for them. I think they have to know, their lawyers have to know, that one of the most important things at this stage, at any stage of any trial, but particularly at this stage, the judges already determined that the financial statements in this case were fraudulent. That's not up for debate. That means that their credibility on whether or not this was continuing, ongoing fraudulent behavior and whether they knew about it was kind of central and fundamental. They were not credible witnesses. All of the public reporting on this has been, I think, spot on in saying things like, on one hand, Eric Trump says, hey, I'm just the guy who poured the concrete at the properties. And on another hand, then having to admit to an email where he's being asked questions on a financial statement. Those financial statements are central to the things that they're being claimed to have misrepresented on. And it's very interesting to watch them kind of say, I just did everything my dad told me to. Oh, wait, no, I took and did all of this without him. They're flip-flopping. The evidence is strong against them, and they're coming off as people who do not tell the truth. That's a bad look in a fraud trial about whether or not you're being truthful.
So, Renato, Maya brings up a great point. Judge Engoron has already decided that there is a problem here. Like, there's liability. These were fraudulent statements. We're in the penalty phase where he's supposed to determine what the actual penalties will be for the Trump organization. How does this week's testimony play into that? And was the Trump team successful, or did they really do themselves some damage this week?
I think it was a very, very challenging week. I do agree with Maya there. Ultimately, what they have to convince the judge is that some of, I'll call the nuclear options that the AG is giving the court. In other words, for example, making it so that they can't do business in the state of New York, dissolving some of these companies, appointing a receiver. some of those penalties aren't warranted. And unfortunately, I really don't think that they did themselves any favors. And I really think that that is kind of underscored by the fact that most of the posturing around this from the Trump team has been attacking the judge, poking at the judge, attacking the process. And I think they basically know that they're headed toward defeat. And I really think, Melissa, that the defeat was sown when Eric Trump took the fifth 500 times in his deposition. At that point, that could be held against him. And I think from then on, it's really just been all about a slow, march towards defeat for Trump in this particular lawsuit.
So, Renato, there's a lot going on here. The main Trump family defense seems to be, I trusted my accountants, I trusted the lawyers, I'm just a pencil pusher here. But a big part of Trump's political mystique is this idea that he is a really good businessman and his sons are really good businessmen, and this is a first-class business operation. How is this all going to play out if this is, in fact, the defense that they're just pencil pushers, not real businessmen?
Yeah, that has to be the defense, Melissa, because you can't, when you have two different valuations for the same property and you're telling the banks one thing and the government another, they can't both be true at the same time. So they have to blame somebody. And I will tell you, you can bet your bottom dollar that the accountants, the lawyers aren't going to march in there and say it was all their fault. That you can, without a doubt, the bank takes the bank. So, yeah, look, I do think that's where they have to go. And that's why they're trying to shift the narrative. Trump, when he gets caught in one lie, he always tries to pivot to another. And he was a brilliant businessman before, supposedly. Now that he doesn't look that way, well, now it's the process. Now it's the attorney general. She's somehow biased. Oh, the judge is biased. The law clerk's biased. It's all attacking the process because really, I don't think the facts are defensible.
So, Maya, this is a bench trial, which means that Judge Engoron is going to be the one who ultimately makes the decision here. This is not going before a jury. And yesterday, Judge Engoron lashed out at Trump attorney Chris Kise for comments that apparently Kise made about Judge Engoron's law clerk, saying, "There is a sense of misogyny in you, referring to my female principal law clerk. Do not refer to my staff again. She is a civil servant." Are you surprised that he issued this new gag order that now includes the Trump lawyers? And what was the meaning of them going after the law clerk?
Yeah, look, I'm not surprised. I mean, this is a judge who's made clear that he's going to keep order in his courtroom, but he's also going to be intolerant of the kind of attacks that are attacks against people that is sadly and disturbingly typical of Trump and Trump's legal team's general way of treating our judicial system across these cases that he's facing. Not necessarily unique in this one, but it is shocking to see a lawyer do it, shocking to see a lawyer do it in front of the judge about the judge's staff. I mean, back to Renato's point about the fact that this is the judge you have to convince, it means you typically don't want to antagonize him as a human being when he has the power to make a decision about just how much penalty you're going to pay and whether, to Renato's point, you go nuclear option. Well, maybe don't kick the beehive if you don't want the bees to sting you. I would just say that, and this has been repeated in this case. I mean, the judge has excoriated the attorneys even in some of their filings. So this isn't even new behavior. They've just antagonized this judge. But I will say this. This is a judge who is not going to make his penalty decision based on whether his personal feelings about whether he or his staff has been disrespected. He's going to make this decision based on what he believes the evidence supports as the appropriate penalty. And I think that's really important because whatever the penalty is, we know that Donald Trump and his team are going to try to suggest and argue that it is somehow unfair, unjust. That's not who this judge is.